All right, well, so this is Japan. Speaking a little more specifically, this is Nonoichi, which was the town that I lived in for 2 years while I was teaching English over there at elementary schools. Specifically, that elementary school over there, that you can kind of see that little bit of the schoolyard there in the bigger building, was one of the three that I taught at. The others are too far away that way and that way for me to really point them out easily. But this is basically all just a suburban town next to Kanazawa. You can see some of those bigger buildings over there. We're going to go there in a minute, but this was just a suburb of that city. And so this is kind of what a Japanese suburb looks like. Lots of houses, a little bit more spread out than, big apartment buildings and stuff you'd find in a city, but definitely still kind of crunched in. So this right here is my apartment building. I was that third door on the second floor over there. And this is kind of what most residential neighborhoods looked like. If you go in any direction, like some of the roads kind of run straight, like this one does, kind of going around. But as you kind of move around the neighborhood, you'll also see stuff like this little alley here that kind of curves around, roads that have like one or two houses on them and kind of intersect in weird places, and a lot of little fields. A lot of people would just grow like a single field of rice, and that was like their backyard. And then they'd either sell it to grocery stores, give it to their neighbors, like do whatever with it. But even in, sort of more urban areas like this, I think Kanazawa had a population of like 500,000, so like about the same as Minneapolis. But even so, like the moment you got out of the city center, you'd see kind of places like this. And if you go further south that way, you can actually kind of see it. Where the colors change, boom, straight goes to country. Even in the middle of a city that has like skyscrapers and a lot of stuff going on, you were only ever like the 15-20 minutes train ride away from the middle of nowhere, mostly because, mountains, you're not really going to build a lot of houses on those. But going back down to the street, all my schools were that way, but most of the places that I would like shop and stuff were further down this way. So you just kind of go around, would have like, rivers like this are pretty common and they're really nice to walk up and down. Unfortunately, I did not teach at this school right here. If I had, it would have been a much faster commute. But instead I had like anywhere from a 10 to half-hour bike ride to get to wherever I was going, which really wasn't too bad. I mean, I was still not having to drive anywhere. But this is a good example of what a school building looks like. They all tend to be at least 3 or 4 stories tall, just because you're building into a smaller space, and they'd usually be centered around a courtyard. Otherwise, the courtyard itself would be fenced in. Very big on security. But then, if you start to get out of sort of the side suburban area as you're walking along, you can see right here is a bigger road that goes all the way up to Kanazawa. And so bigger roads like this, like actual full two-way with lanes and everything, tended to like go through most towns, and you kind of have to work your way through the residential to get there. If I were actually on foot, I would walk between these two fields because it's actually a really nice walk on that little thing right there. But I'm not actually on my feet, and I assume the Google car couldn't drive through someone's field. So I'm actually going to cheat. I'm just going to bop over here a little bit. And so this would be like a major grocery store. There's like a sushi place down here I'd go to, and you've got this nice like 4 lanes of traffic. Pretty thin lanes, but Japanese cars on average were a bit smaller, so easier to do that. And then if you head up this road, you can see, unlike all these like little patchwork residential roads, this main highway just literally goes all the way up. Eventually it connects with another one coming from over there. And then you just keep going all the way till you get to the city. Like I said, Kanazawa is not one of the bigger cities. 500,000 is not that big, especially when you compare it to like some big megalopolis like Tokyo that's going to have millions and millions of people in it. But this is kind of what the city center looked like. You'd take the bus or ride a bike for 20 minutes or so, and you'd be up here with lots of like tall stacked buildings, little bars and restaurants stacked on all the floors and in the basements. And just lots of stuff tucked in. It was always nice to be able to just walk around, check stuff out. And we had exactly one really cool big intersection, and it's this one coming up right here. A lot of bigger intersections in Japan will have like dedicated pedestrian ankle walks. This is the only one in the city that had this, because this is basically the center of all the nightlife, all the bars, clubs, 24-hour convenience stores on every corner, kind of floating around here. But one of the nice things about living in Kanazawa is that if you kept following the road up, you get to Kenrokuen, which is one of the bigger parks in Japan, and one of the higher rated ones too. So it was really nice to be able to just come here on weekends. Like, it's nice to be able to say, oh yeah, last weekend I just sort of like toddled over to Kenrokuen and like hung out in the park near this cool old Japanese building. It was one of the bigger culture shocks for me, just being able to easily find old stuff and cool stuff and cultural monuments. The country's full of them, and whereas, like, I don't know, I feel like in America, when you do find stuff, you kind of have to drive a really long ways to get to it most of the time, as opposed to just being able to just like walk around this cool garden and see the cherry blossoms. They actually got a photo that had some of the cherry blossoms in them, which is pretty cool. Very popular coming to parks and just like hanging out under these things in the spring. So it's kind of surprising that there's not a lot of crowds here. I'm guessing that the photos were all taken on like a weekday or something. So yeah, that is the garden. And really the main connection point to the city was further up. Goodness, let's see if I can find it. Train line. You can see that just cutting through. If you look at any like elevated section of the country, you'll always see these, because the train lines tend to be like the actual straightest thing that cuts across the city. So this was the train station. Every year they would actually, they wanted to scare off, what was it? Smaller birds from like nesting in here or like accidentally hitting themselves in the glass, because all of this clear glass, especially under here, which was totally covered, would cause a lot of bird accidents. So they would release hunting hawks periodically that would go around the area and like hunt and scare off birds to keep this place clear. And it was something they did a few times a year, and you could like come watch the like traditional falconers or whatever do it, and it was kind of cool. I never got to see it, but I saw some really cool photos of it. So if you took the bullet train that way, it would go like way across the mountains and you'd wind up in Tokyo. And if you took it that way, it would go south and eventually you'd end up in like Kyoto, all the way over there. But the nice thing is, it's also right next to the ocean, with a peninsula sticking up that way. And the nice thing is, this meant that the seafood in the area was actually really good, even compared to like the Japanese norm. And crab in particular in the winter was really good. But yeah, this was where I palled around. Lots of good hiking in the mountains. Lots of cool nooks to explore. I'd actually really highly recommend Kanazawa for travel, but this is less of a travel advertisement and more of a general sort of thing. I actually have no idea what this is. Is this the community center? Oddly enough, I never really went to a lot of the Nonoichi like community spaces because I technically lived in Kanazawa, so I never really had a reason to go to a lot of the like civic things in Nonoichi. But yeah, this is it. This is what it looks like.